Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose, the #1 health podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every one of you that come back every week to listen, learn, and grow. Now, this happens now and again, but there's someone that I've been following, admiring from afar, and then you see they follow you and you just go, I want to connect with this human and I want to get to know them. And someone that when you watch their content, you feel like you already know them. And the few moments I've spent with her, just as she'd been walking into the studio, I already felt like I had a connection with her, and there was a really beautiful warm hug and just like this really positive feeling. But this is someone who has dominated as an entrepreneur, been extremely successful as a business person, an incredible host and interviewer, someone who is so multi-talented across the board, whether it's being authentic on camera, off camera, editing, creating, the works. And I'm speaking about the one and only Alex Cooper, creator, host, and executive producer of the hugely successful, which is an understatement, the podcast brand called Call Her Daddy. Alex is one of the most listened to female podcasters in the world with millions of listeners per episodes. And Alex continues to break all boundaries by shattering stigmas and stomping on misogyny, all while keeping mental health and personal empowerment at the forefront. And that's what really drew me into her work, was when I started to see her talk about mental health and well-being and habits. I was just blown away. And I was like, we have to make this happen for our On Purpose community. And to the millions of devoted Gen Z and millennial listeners, the Daddy Gang, the Call Her, which I'm a part of, the Call Her Daddy brand represents a new set of values and standards. And in addition to Alex, has a successful merchandise line, as well as several exciting businesses and endeavors in the pipeline, which I can't wait to discuss. Alex, welcome to On Purpose.
Thank you so much for having me. I need to make that like my alarm clock every morning of just really hype myself up. Oh my God, you are so good at doing those intros.
No, well, it's part of this culture that I adopted through living as a monk. And it was just when you met someone or when you introduced people, it was always part of the culture to genuinely feel awe with who you're in front of and to genuinely take in what they've done, because it helps you feel more grateful when you're with them. I feel very grateful to be with you today. I feel more inspired. I feel like I can learn. I feel curious. And I feel often, at least from the culture I grew up in, we always played people down. We always kind of thought, oh, well, we don't want to say this stuff about them. But I actually thought you have a worse conversation, because then you're thinking, well, what do I have to learn from this person? Or this person's probably going to be up themselves. So what am I going to get?
Yeah, that's
and
actually,
it ruins the vibe.
That's a great concept, because I feel like with social media, people now, everyone, millennial, Gen Z, everyone's like, we're all egotistical. And so sometimes you try to downplay what you're doing, but it's actually such a great concept that you're taking a complete different spin. You're like, let's actually embrace our successes and everything we're doing and embrace it and enjoy it, rather than feel shamed and want to be hush hush about it. Or on the other side, don't be jealous of someone if they're thriving, and because you can learn from them. I'm so excited to sit across from you today, because I'm like, Jay Shetty, let's get into it, because I'm geeking. I'm a huge fan. What you're doing is so incredible. I listen to your podcast, and I don't listen to many, but I'm very excited and humbled to be here. So thank you.
Oh, that's the biggest compliment. I had no idea. So now I'm blushing if you're listening.
We're both blushing.
Yeah. And I have to tell you this, because I just love people knowing this, and I really appreciate that coming from you. But I have a rule that whenever we bring on a new team member, one of the questions I ask them in the interview is, who would you love as a guest of On Purpose? Who would that person be? But then Helena, who's our podcast producer, it was you. And she was just like, yeah, and I was like, she's already scheduled.
Helena, I love it. Daddy gang, daddy gang, daddy gang, daddy gang.
And so it was just this beautiful feeling where she was like, yeah, I'd love Alex Cooper. And I was like, we've already got her scheduled. She's coming on the show. It was already happening.
I'm honored. Thank you.
So anyway, you have a lot of love in our community for you.
Thank you.
We're all big fans. But let's dive straight into it.
Let's get into it.
For me, when I'm observing someone like you, looking from the outside in, I think one of the things that fascinates me is what's someone interested in behind the camera? I just saw you in Italy. Me and my wife were so jealous and FOMOing, because we used to go to Italy every summer when we lived in London. We're both born and raised in London. What was your favorite thing about Italy?
The food, the pasta. I have never been. I rarely take big vacations like that. And I was so excited to just try the pasta. I grew up in Pennsylvania. And so, I don't know if we're like running to the fish department in Pennsylvania. You're like, ooh, what can we eat? So it was kind of like Italian, but it was kind of bad Italian. Sorry to everyone in Pennsylvania. And so, but I've always loved carbs and I was an athlete. So I'm like, when I get there, it was breakfast, lunch, dinner, pasta, let's go, dessert, pasta, let's go. So it was amazing. But we went to the Amalfi Coast. That was beautiful. I just felt so fortunate to be there and it was incredible.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I was genuinely living through your stories and I was just like, oh, I want to go back. So we're planning next year now.
Amazing.
But everyone from the US felt like they were in Italy this summer.
Everyone.
Like everyone I know.
Every single person on my Instagram was in Italy. So I was like, okay, great. I'm going. This is the first year I won't have FOMO. Because I always see people in these places like Ibiza or, Mykonos. And I've never been any of those places. And I was like, this year I'm going to Italy and I'm doing it. And it was amazing. One
of the things I love about you in person that I'm observing is that you're so warm. Like from the moment you walked in, so warm. Like, I love it when someone gets out their car and they arrive at my home, the first thing I want to do is hug them. And when I see that same energy, I'm like, this is awesome. But one of the things people observe about you online is that you're confident. You're very confident on the podcast. You're very confident in your stories, which is a beautiful quality. Was young Alex confident too? I know we've heard about like you grew up in front of the camera with your father and like, so was confidence always easy for you? And how has your journey with confidence evolved?
The answer is no. Absolutely not. It's actually been interesting because the past year I've really started to get into this in therapy with my therapist. And I haven't really, I think I've mentioned it a couple of times to the daddy gang, but I don't talk about it a lot because I'm still kind of going through it in therapy. When I was younger, I had a really hard time in school. Not grades wise, I was a solid B. Let's throw it out there. Maybe if I tried a little harder, we could have gotten some A's, but I was severely bullied for my looks. I was super, super skinny. People made fun of me, said that like I looked like I had an eating disorder. I had awful, awful acne to the point where like I would beg my parents to like let me stay home from school. And it was so bad. And I turned inward a lot. Like I never wanted my parents to know that I was going through it because I was ashamed. It's embarrassing to not be able to connect with your peers and also I was physically bullied. Like the boys would be like, let's play a game. Her legs are so tiny. Like if we trip her, they will snap in half. And like, it was awful. And I never really talked about it, but what got me through it actually was my dad works in sports and he's a producer. And I remember at like 7 years old, he handed me a camera and was like, go make something. And so my escape from really I hated everything about myself. I hated my skin, my face, my hair, my teeth, my body, my torso, my legs. Like I could pinpoint every single thing about myself that I hated, and it was almost everything exterior wise. But inside, I knew I was a good person. I knew I was a good daughter. I knew I was a good friend, but I felt like it was all based on looks of why I was getting bullied. So I turned to creating content. That's what was my escape. And I would go in my basement and I would make music videos, or I would write scripts and make like little short films or silent films. And I would put on wigs and put on outfits and makeup. And it was the first time that I truly felt safe. Like I could be fully myself. Meanwhile, I was fully alone. So I'm like a weirdo in my basement. But it was that and soccer specifically. I played extremely competitive soccer, and I realized why I felt so safe also and seen in soccer, because it was all women. Can you score a goal? Like, what are you doing? So what are you bringing to the team, So I don't talk about that a lot because it was actually interesting. I recently was interviewed by the New York Times, and I don't do a lot of interviews.
I read that piece.
And it was in a follow-up conversation. We had like an 1.5-hour interview. The reporter asked to do a follow-up, and somehow we got on the topic of my childhood. And he and I started talking, and I shared with him that I had been bullied. And quite literally physically, his demeanor, his face, like his jaw dropped, and I could tell he was shocked. And everything that 1.5-hour interview I first did with him kind of was shattered, because he was like, wait, what? Like, you were bullied? And I realized something in that moment was like the character I've created on Call Her Daddy. There's this dichotomy of, for me, the girl that was bullied and then the girl I've created or the woman I've created in the show. But I think a lot of people have a hard time because everyone wants to put things in boxes, understanding like there's no way Alex Cooper, the confident Call Her Daddy girl, could have also been bullied when she was younger. And what I've come to realize in therapy is actually that ugly, awkward, acne girl is who started Call Her Daddy. Because if I had not gone through that, there's no way I would have started Call Her Daddy. I remember reading Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. And it was like, you've got to have 10,000 hours to even be considered an expert. By 8th grade, I was considered an expert in editing. I was like obsessed with creating content. And so that's kind of a little bit of my story where I definitely struggle sometimes to open up about it because I'm also aware on the internet, sometimes people are like, you're lying, that's not true. And I think it's hard for me because it's still so raw. Like I still haven't even fully gone there in therapy that I don't talk about it a lot because I don't want to be dismissed or questioned over something that is so personal and still really hard for me to talk about, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for trusting us and me and being vulnerable, but also talking about the complexity of vulnerability. I think we live at a time when if someone is vulnerable, that everyone's response will be like, oh, like, you know, or A, people think that's why someone's doing it. B, if they don't think that and they think you're just being vulnerable, sometimes it's complex to say, well, maybe it wasn't that hard as someone's making it out. And then there's a third where it's like, well, can we just listen to someone's experience and recognize that? I think if all of us reflect, like I just realized we have so much in common, which I had no idea. And if you looked at it from the outside, I don't think people would think we have much in common at all, which is partly why I love conversations like this, because I'm like, these are the conversations that bring me to life. So I was bullied for being overweight growing up. I was obese growing up. And so was my wife, actually. And so separately, we didn't know each other at the time, but we were both bullied for being overweight. I was bullied for being Indian because there weren't many Indian kids in my school. And so the color of my skin and all the rest of it, I was bullied for that. And I wasn't the coolest kid in school. I was a straight A student. So I was the opposite. And it was like, and it was considered dorky to be smart, especially where I grew up. And so I dealt with all of that too. And so when I'm hearing you say that, I was beaten up at school regularly. My mom used to come defend me in school. Like that was really embarrassing. Like, and even now when people are like, no way. Like, and I'm like, no, that was my entire childhood. And for me, I turned to listening to Eminem and writing music. So I did a lot of spoken word. I used to produce music. It's why I love word and language and just the artistry of what you can do with words. And then when you said you played soccer, which I know, but I'm like, that is my first love. Like if I could be anything in the world, it would be a professional soccer player, like beyond everything.
That is crazy to hear because I agree with you. And that is why I love podcasting and why I love your show, my show, is like you really have no idea what one you can connect with someone on, empathize with someone on, or just like learn about them. And I feel like we've gotten to a point where we want to like discredit and call people out. And it's scary to be open and vulnerable on the internet. And I think like almost my persona, there was parts of me that I had to like try to claw back what I started for Call Her Daddy. Cause I was like, hold on, I need to also like, there's other parts to me other than this salacious, wild, crazy. And it was a great transition for me, which I know we'll get to, but the bullying thing, when you're that young and truly all that matters is peer acceptance. And you feel so alone, you hate yourself. And I realized recently, like, I know my persona is one thing, and that's why I always struggle with this. I'm like, oh, I gotta like ease my listeners into like me talking about this because it's a complete different side of myself. But we all have that, right? We all have those things. Like I remember the first time I shared this with my mother was when I was 21 years old in a cab that I had been bullied. And I told her, Mom, in high school, I used to put on 3 pairs of leggings, tape it to my leg, and then put on my school pants just to hope that everyone would think my legs were bigger.
Wow.
And by the time I would have soccer practice after school, my joints were in so much pain from sitting in class. And I told my mom this quite literally as we're pulling up to Penn Station. She was getting out and I was going to keep going. I told her this as she's getting out of the cab and she's like, Alex, like what? And it was my defense mechanism of like, I don't really want to talk about it, but I need to let my mom know what I was going through. When I look back, thank God my father has been the most supportive person in my life with my career. And I'm so grateful for that. Like any moment I needed anything, he was like, let's go find you. I want to make a green screen in the basement. And he's like, let's go to Joann Fabrics. Like, here we go. Let's go to Home Depot. Like, let's go lights. Like I was so fortunate to be raised by people who support me. But I also realized I had these like people pleasing tendencies and I still catch myself doing it in media. Like, I just want to be liked because of my childhood, because of feeling left out. And it's hard. And I think comparison, like my best friend was the beautiful doll baby, perfect girl that I wanted to be. And it's like, there's so many remedies I tried to look up on Google when I was younger of like, how to like fix your skin and how to make your legs look bigger. And is there a procedure? And it was like, I just can't believe how much I hated myself. But I truly don't believe I would be sitting here if I hadn't gone through that, because I think that's the thing, like you just said, you had no idea what I went through, right? Why I feel like I am half decent at my job is when I sit down with people, there is this empathetic side to me that, maybe I don't need to talk about, because I don't think I need to prove anything to anyone as to why I'm a good friend, why I'm a good daughter and partner. But like, it really does come from feeling so alone and isolated and hating yourself that in those moments when I'm in my basement making and creating, I had to find a way to love myself, because I found like this journal of mine when I was younger. Oh my God, it's so sad. And it was like really dark thoughts of like, what if I did this? Then the kids would feel so awful. And it's like, whoa. I was really alone when I was younger, and I never talked about it. And I had a friend recently that shared similar thoughts with me. We were best friends, and I had no idea what she was going through, and she had no idea what I was going through. So it's just like a reminder of like, we really don't know. And I know that's such an oversaid thing, but you have no idea what people are going through. And I think especially with social media, we can make judgments, especially snap judgments. You see a headline, you see a picture, but like, we have no idea what people are going through.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I love the point that you're making that. And I think everyone has it through some way, whether it was your parents, whether it was your friends, whether it was your peers, there was someone who made you feel less than in your childhood, inadequate, incomplete. And now we're all in our creative endeavors seeking that completion through whatever role, character, whatever it may be. And I think people forget that half the time the most successful people who do the most incredible things did them because they had this huge gap and hole to fill. And the world needed to fill that hole and gap. Absolutely. Only then to realize that doesn't work either. Right. To then have to go the other way. But sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I agree with you. It's like there's a reason I'm so passionate and interested in what I'm doing. It's because like I love connecting with people. I love learning about people, because I know that the dichotomy of call her daddy girl versus ugly, awkward, acne girl, it's like you don't expect it and you don't really understand it until I fully explain it, which I know I haven't explained yet. But it's when I sit down with people, I love learning about people, because we're all going through such similar things. It may look different, it may feel a little bit different, but depression, anxiety, happiness, love, joy, whatever emotion, like we are all human beings, and we genuinely actually all can connect. Yeah. Every single person can connect on at least one thing in the world. And so I feel like we've kind of lost that along the way. And I think with shows like ours, like I hope it brings a little bit of that authentic nature back, because we're looking past like what could be inside of someone. We're just looking on the surface level. And that to me is a nightmare, because when I was younger, I didn't want anyone to just take me by my looks, because then I wouldn't be given the time of day.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear that. I was literally having the same conversation. I was with one of my clients this morning, and we were talking about this, and he was saying how unrelatable his life has become now through his success and everything that he's gone through. And I looked at him and I was talking to him, and I said to him that, I'll be honest with you, that whether someone's rich or not, famous or not, if someone goes through a breakup hurts the same, because none of the other stuff is medicine. Like none of the other stuff is the cure. So whether you have fame and status and wealth or whether you don't, if you go through a breakup, if you lose a parent, if you lost your job, like, or you missed out on opportunity, there is a similar amount of experience, human pain that you go through. And I think what you're saying is really interesting though. Like, I think you're talking about that time. People always often ask like, oh, what advice would you give to your younger self? With you, I'm more interested in like, what do you think your younger self would say to you now? Like if that acne girl like saw you now as you described her, what would she say? What would she think?
If younger me only knew like, Alex, you're going to make it. You're going to like, your dreams are going to come true. Like you're going to get out of this. I remember one of the boys I went to middle school with that bullied me ended up going to my college. And at that point I had a little glow up, KJ. And he was like trying to hit on me and giving me all this attention. And it only made me just feel actually awful because I was like, I'm the same person. Yeah. I'm the same exact person, if not like more grown and obviously experienced and have a little bit more of a higher IQ at this point in my life, but I'm the same person to my core, and you're only treating me differently because I got a prescription for Accutane, got some hair dye, got my braces off, put on some muscle because I'm playing soccer. Like it's quite literally just the physical as to why you're acting differently towards me. I think my younger self would look at my older self and would not even believe it, probably. I actually was thinking like, what would I say to someone that's younger and going through this? And it's like, there's nothing of like, walk into school that day and stand up for yourself. It's actually like, find yourself in your alone moments because you're all you have, truly. And so trying to get peer approval, sure, it may make the moment a little bit easier, but like, these people don't actually matter. They matter to me, to my core of who they've made me, their impact on my childhood and making me hate myself. Like it's so crazy. I always think about before like 5th or 6th grade, we're so innocent. You have no almost concept of even what you truly look like or your peer dynamic or, oh, boys are looking at me and I don't have boobs yet and my friend does. And so I'm not on their top 5. And I know it sounds so, just dumb but it means so much when you're that young. So I look back and it's like those years where you start, especially to be judged for what you look like when we're actually just trying to figure out inside who we are. It's so problematic. Wow. I definitely think that it affected me of what I did put emphasis on my looks. I can talk about that in therapy now. Like hating every single thing about myself. Of course, I was like, I want to go bleach my hair. I want to be the girl that I saw on the magazines. And then I did all of that. And I even look back at pictures of myself when I took it way too far, but it was all just for me to try to feel like the women that I thought had it all because they looked a certain way. I guess I would just tell my younger self, like, keep going down in that basement. It sounds creepy. Guys, my basement was like finished, don't worry. And leaning into your craft, because in the darkest of moments, creating content actually formed who I am and gave me the strength to keep going. And it made me a full, whole individual in my own right. And when I was getting bullied and when I was going through those hard times, realizing I'm going to turn my passion into my purpose, that's all I needed to be like, okay, let's keep going. So I was really fortunate to find that at a young age, but I think a lot of people do. When you're at a young age and you are going through something so hard, you find that outlet, right? And everyone has that one thing that they're like, I love this. And I'm just fortunate enough to have made that into my career.
Alex, I love listening to you. Like, I am just so happy right now because I'm like, what we're hearing, and I love what you said earlier, that you're in therapy right now, you're working through this, and so you haven't shared so much of this, but I'm just hearing so much coherence and so much clarity, and it's so beautiful, like hearing someone who's gone through so much pain, so much stress, and yes, externally there's the success, but then to hear what's happening internally, and you've just reminded me of a moment of my life. I remember being at the final year of elementary school, or primary school as we call it in London, and there was one girl that everyone fancied in class. And I fancied her too. Like, she was the cutest girl in school. We're like 11 years old. So whatever cute means at 11. I think it was the first time I'd ever liked a girl in that way. I come late to school one day and everyone's looking at me weird. Like, everyone's really looking at me really strange, and everyone's laughing, and some of the girls in the corner laughing and pointing. And I'm thinking, what happened? Like, what did I miss out on? I can't remember why I was late, maybe doctor's appointment, whatever. Then I found out that all the guys who equally fancied this girl had told the girls that I fancied her. So not anyone else knew apart from just me. And I was considered the ugliest, fattest kid in school. And so now she knew this. All her friends were laughing. And then the rest of that day, they all stood. I used to be a goalkeeper because I wasn't very athletic at the time. I used to be and goalkeepers are very athletic. So no offense to goalkeepers. At least at that time, when you're a kid in school.
It's okay, Jay.
I'm just like, you know. I'm like, guys.
We got to clarify.
Just being clear. I think goalkeepers are very David De Gea all the way. I'm in goal and all the girls are standing behind the goal and they're just like, Jay, you can never get her. I can't believe you thought it. She's out of your league. And they're literally the whole day throughout the playground, like every time we're playing football, soccer, they're just behind the goal, like making fun of me. And it's such a
it makes
deep memory.
It makes me honestly, because I think it's interesting. I even watch you. We can smile through it now, but it honestly makes me want to cry when I think about it. Because even hearing that, like I can picture that happening to you because it happened to me. And it's so traumatizing when that happens to you and you literally are just fighting back tears and you're like, just get through it. And all you want to do is go home. And it makes you hate interacting. It makes you nervous. You get really like clammed up and it's awful. Like I remember when I was in middle school, also like my teachers, I went to Catholic school. And I just like never thought I belonged in Pennsylvania. I was like, what am I doing here? Like I knew I wanted to do something that was definitely like big, but I also knew this is a very conservative town and we were shamed for anything regarding anything because it's Catholic. And I remember we weren't allowed to wear makeup and I was breaking out so bad. Like it was so awful this week. And it was finals, so I couldn't skip school. Like I would beg my mom to let me skip school. And she, thank God to my mother, would see when I was really struggling, would be like, okay, you can stay home. I put a tiny bit of concealer over some of my acne because I would sit next to this kid that was like the coolest kid in school. And I would always be so upset because he got to see that side of my face. And in front of the entire class, my teacher, I want to call her out, Mrs. G, I'll just say, okay, I'm like getting there. She comes over to the entire class and looks at me and goes, Alex, you're wearing face makeup. Go to the bathroom and wash it off. She escorted me into the bathroom, made me rub my skin raw in a school bathroom, no soap, just water, scrubbing it off. My face was so red. And I remember just being like, can I go to the bathroom? She's like, no, get back to class. And I just trying to hold back tears and my entire face was inflamed. And I was like, so now I'm not even experiencing bullying from kids. Like this is like, how does this teacher not know? And she has kids. So it was a lot, but I will say it made me who I am today. I look back and I'm like, had I not gone through all of that, like I said earlier, I know who I am now. I didn't back then. I was trying to figure it out, but I know who I am now. And I know my morals and my values. And I know that a lot of that stems from the pain that I went through. And I am a very empathetic person. Maybe I don't show that a lot on my show, but I think it's all relative. I'm like, oh, if I could go back, would I redo it? No, maybe I would have wished I told my parents a little bit more. But still, I think it made me really turn inward. And that created a different level of strength and self-reliance that like I can't even put into words. So
that is such a powerful point. I mean, you've made so many amazing points that I'm going to be drawing together for all our listeners at the end. But like, that is such a powerful point that I think, and I don't want to tell people to go either way, but there's a different strength that comes from going inward than the strength that's required from asking other people for help. And both strengths are important. Like going out and knowing to ask your mom or your dad or your best friend for help is extremely important, but knowing how to go and ask yourself for help internally is equally important. I think that is such a beautiful point. I've never heard it been put that way.
Thank you.
And I love that idea of, because I feel the same way. I felt so isolated and alone. And even today when I feel that way sometimes, but now it's become solitude, it's become a strength because I've got used to depending on myself. And I know what that feels like when I'm like, I'm all I have. And I know what that feels like. So now it doesn't scare me.
Totally.
Whereas at 12 or 13 or 14, it really did. I think one of the things we're talking about is an evolution in identity and awareness. And this has been something that I've struggled with as things have become more public as well. Because, so I went from being that kid that was bullied to being fairly in with the cool kids in high school, to then going to college and being a budding spiritualist. Like my college life, if anyone met me at college, they'd be like, Jay was like nice and loving and spiritual and mindful and all these things that I was practicing. If you spoke to my high school friends, they'd be like, Jay was a party animal. He drank too much. He was crazy. Like he was the class clown. Like he tormented teachers. Like that was my reputation. And so you get this complete dichotomy. And I feel like every transition my external life took, I saw it as an opportunity to become who I wanted to be. So as I left high school, I wanted to become this mindful, thoughtful individual, and that's what I was at college. And then I went off to be a monk, which was a whole different external identity. Left that, and now obviously doing all of this for the past few years, and so many more in between. But the point is that I've given myself permission to accept that I am the same and different person all at the same time.
So beautiful.
Right? Like,
Yep.
and I've given myself that permission even when other people haven't. And I feel like I'm constantly going through that where I did used to be a monk. I'm not now. I'm married. I have a home. I have businesses. I have money. Like so life has changed. But there are parts of being a monk that are still me. They're still there. I still think like a monk, and there's parts of my lifestyle that are still like a monk. There are parts that are not. So coming back to you, you've also been on an evolution of identities. We've just talked about a very clear one. You then have the beginning of the podcast, which is very well documented. It's all there. I don't want to dive into it. And that part of the journey's there. And then now it becomes another label where it's like Spotify, 60, like it becomes so like diluted to a number and a brand. And you can go wherever you want to go with this. But the question I'm asking is, what has been the hardest part of that evolution for you to where you are now? And what do you think people misinterpret about that evolution?
It is difficult because I feel, especially as a woman in the industry, I have to tiptoe on not being overly confident. Like, I think women can all feel it. Don't be too much of this. Always veer on the side of just be quiet. Well, I've got a podcast. That's a little bit difficult, right? So I definitely have struggled with the person and who I've become is confident. And I want to embody this confident and determined, badass CEO running my life that any woman could do what I'm doing, right? In whatever aspect they want to do it in their life and whatever their passion is. But it is difficult when then I walk into board meetings or meetings with these men that, and I'm like, I'm telling you what I want. And I feel like if a man was sitting here, it would be a very different conversation. If anything, he'd be going light. And so I've struggled with, why am I always called the female Joe Rogan? Does anyone say, oh, Joe Rogan's the male Alex Cooper? No, we have similar numbers. We have really loyal audiences. We both are with Spotify. Like, and no shade to Joe. I'm actually just saying it's frustrating that it is a dequalifier. It's comparing me. It's not even comparing me. They're just saying like, oh, she's basically him, but like as a woman. I don't want to be compared to anyone. And it's been hard for me to do it in a way that, I'm not coming off as like angry and mad. And I think there has been times where I feel like I can't be all in business mode at times as I want to be, because I'm, as a woman, going to be labeled. And it's like, no, I actually just know what I want. And I'm a boss and I am running a huge company and I have so much going on and I don't want to waste anyone's time. And I know what I want. What a concept. So I think that is something that people have misinterpreted also on the internet of like, oh, she comes off so like, I don't even know if it's aggressive. Like, I think as a woman, especially, even if I don't know what I want, pretend I know what I want, because we're at a time where, as we've seen in the world, we are not equal to men. We don't have autonomy over our bodies. And so for me, using my platform right now to be like, let me be the boldest I can be, even if people are a little taken aback, I hope it just helps other women be like, I'm going to go in today and advocate for myself to my boss, or I'm going to stand up to that because it's like, we're getting nowhere if we don't keep shoving it forward a little bit. And I've gotten at times a little nervous, and I'm like, I could just sit and do my interviews and stay quiet. But that's never who I've been. I've always had an opinion. I'm a Leo, okay? I know what I want. But it is hard because it's like I think there's a lot of people that are a little skeptical of a really, and I hate when people say loud. Am I talking that loud? No. People are like, she's so loud. I'm like, am I loud? Or am I just speaking about something that maybe you don't want to hear because you don't like change? And we need change. So that's something that I'm currently working on in therapy.
I don't think I've ever done this. I'm about to clap on the podcast. I don't think I've ever done this for any, that I'm just going to clap. I'm going to take a moment to clap. And there should be more people clapping. Hello. Jordan, I need some more. Come on, Homer. There we go.
Oh my God, stop. I'm dying.
I've genuinely we've never done that podcast ever. Like this is the only time, the first time that we've done
honored.
That. I really mean that. Everything you just said, like, it's so true. I'm totally aligned with you. I can only look at it from the perspective that I grew up with a powerhouse mom who worked, cooked, raised me and my younger sister, provided for us both when my dad was figuring his life out. My mom was the breadwinner in the house. She was the one who helped me with my homework. She taught me how to shave. like that's literally who my mom was in my life. And so I grew up seeing the most powerful woman in the world, in my opinion, as a young boy. And like my mom would take me to all her meetings at night, whatever needed to happen. And then I was kind of like like a father figure to my younger sister. And so I've seen it in her too. And I've seen like the stuff she's gone through at work and wherever it may be. So I can only empathize from that perspective.
Yeah.
But when I'm listening to you speak, I'm just like, it's sad that we're still there. Like it just pains me. I'm like, how can we still be there? And how can we still be stuck there? And I want to dive into the gender part with you because I do think it's important that we talk about it here. I deal with that in a different way. And I've never talked about this either, but I feel like we're both in.
Yeah, we're vibing.
Yeah. And it's also like I feel understood with you. And I also know that because you interview and you do such an exceptional job with it, it's like, I feel like I'm getting to open up my heart.
We're interviewing each other together.
I'm like opening up my heart to you. But no, I mean in the sense of, so I often get perceived as like, well, Jay, you're a monk and you're mindful. So you're not allowed to be driven and ambitious. So if I have goals in a business meeting or a PR meeting or whatever it may be, it's like, oh, but Jay, like you shouldn't have goals, right? And I'm like, wait a minute.
Why can't I have both?
Yeah, can I not be both? Am I not allowed to be both? Like,
yep.
And so people are constantly like, but Jay, like, and it's like if we reach for something, and I come from a background of I was straight A's. I worked in the corporate world. I'm highly organized. I'm a high performer. It comes naturally to me, and that's me. And then I was a monk, and I have the meditative side, and I meditate for 2 hours a day, and I wake up early and take cold showers and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, to me, I've tried to put both together to create this real world because neither one makes me happy without the other. So I get the perception of, well, Jay, how can you be mindful and driven? How can you be ambitious and meditate? And I'm like, but that's what we should be encouraging people to be. Like,
I feel like it's because we have gotten so comfortable putting things in boxes. And I love that you're saying that because it reminds me, this is, I think, such a relatable topic. Take me and my deal and my podcast and being a public figure out of it. You mentioned something about how you had these different stages of your life. And I feel like it's so normal and healthy, honestly, to progress and almost be different people of your versions of yourself and try things out. I remember in high school when I was a little bit more now secure with my looks, okay? And I was now the jock. I was on the soccer team. I was a freshman. I was thriving with my soccer girls. They were like big on campus. And I was still obsessed with making content, right? I was so embarrassed that I was in the video production class because my video production professor, God bless him, he was, I guess people would consider like a little nerdy and a little too techie. And I was like, I am so honored to be his student and have him teach me. We would watch movies after class, and like, not in a creepy way, but he was educating me on film. And before Me Too, we would watch Alfred Hitchcock. I remember the first time he showed me Psycho. And so I was learning, but I lied to my peers because I convinced my mom, please, can we go in and talk to the dean of students? I want to do video production for all 4 years as my elective. I never took health, which is interesting. Never learned about sex education. Okay. So interesting. But I remember people being like, why are you in that video production class for all 4 years? This is so weird. And I was embarrassed and I lied. And I was like, I don't know. Like, they think I'm good at it. So like, whatever. I don't have to take health at least. Like, whatever. I downplayed it. I was so passionate. I loved it more than soccer. It was literally my existence. It felt like that is why I'm here. This is what I'm meant to do. But I was so embarrassed because I couldn't be a jock and also a tech girl, like a tech geek or whatever they would call me. And so I tried to hide that part of myself. And I feel like a lot of people do that. Even hearing you say that, like, why can't you be mindful and also determined? And it's like, I actually think that is such a beautiful human being when you can combine all the different parts of yourself to all be in a somewhat cohesive working situation. It works so much better for your mental health. We shouldn't all just be narrow-minded. We shouldn't just have one thing that we're focused on. Do you have a relationship? Are you a good friend? You don't act like to your romantic partner like you do to your friend. What about, are you a good son, a daughter? Like, it all is in the scheme of being humans. We have to have multidimensional parts of ourselves. But something about being in a box, it doesn't work, Jay, if you're both of those, because it can't be true. Well, why not? And I think just talking about it, anyone listening, you should not veer away from a passion because it doesn't align with something other publicly that you're doing, because it's like almost a contradiction. I love a contradiction. That is what I do on my show. They're like, well, you said this last week. I changed my mind this week. And not in like okay, Alex, well, we can't believe anything you say, but things change and things shift. But we have to be cognizant of how we're embracing different parts of ourselves, because if we try to not do that and just stay in one lane, we're not going to grow. We're not going to be happy with ourselves, and we're just going to be appeasing the people around us instead of what do we want. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's a really relatable thing of like, how can I be both? Of course you can be both. It's just society has made us feel like, well, you're a poser. You can't be both. Which one isn't as true? They're both true.
I'm about to clap again. Literally, like, this is just like,
guys, we're just clapping. This is Claps with Alex Cooper.
No, these are all TED Talks. Like, it's just one after the other after the other. I'm
No, you're inspiring me.
No, I'm just. I hope it's okay. Like, I don't know. I'm opening up because I just feel like the stuff we're talking about is. is relatable in different ways, right? Like, I don't know what it feels like to be a woman in the industry. I never will. I will never be able to be like, I get that. I totally know what you mean. But I get what I'm feeling in the same expression of sometimes I feel told to be quiet. Sometimes I feel told to be like, well, Jay, you shouldn't have that desire. Like, I'm told to like calm down sometimes, not because I'm aggressive in any way, but in the sense of just because I'm a driven, ambitious person. So going back to what you were saying earlier, there's a part of it where it sounds like, especially, and I love what you said, like, it's not about what Joe's doing. It's not about what anyone's doing. It's just, why does everything have to be a comparison? And that then starts to be a respect issue, right? It starts to be an issue in like, are we giving enough respect to what you've achieved and what you've built? In the same way as, are we giving respect to anyone else for what they've achieved and what they've built? What has been your relationship like with respect?
It's hard because there's a couple dimensions to it, right? My listeners quite literally, and I know this sounds corny, but like truly feel like an extension of myself. We have an understanding. We have talked about the most deep, in-depth, maybe taboo topics, uncomfortable topics. And when I meet the Daddy Gang, shout out everyone listening, that's Daddy Gang. When I meet the Daddy Gang out in person, I always joke because whenever I'm with anyone, they come up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, Alex." I'm like, "Hi, what's up?" And they're like, "Okay." And they start talking. And the person that's with me, that's my friend or my parent or whatever, they're like, "Oh, who is that, from college or high school?" I'm like, "No, that's Daddy Gang." So like, wait, you guys just started talking about her break? Like, what? We have this understanding of like, if you listen to Call Her Daddy, and I'm sure you have that with your audience, like you build such a rapport. The respect I have for the Daddy Gang and my listeners and people that give me a chance, it is so mutual and it is so beautiful. And I can't still to this day believe what has been built of Call Her Daddy and the Daddy Gang and my relationship with them and theirs with me. I think where it becomes a little bit of a struggle is in the beginning of Call Her Daddy, it was this beautiful storm, right? A female-led podcast working at Barstool Sports, which people are like, "Oh, is that a misogynistic company?" And it was like actually the perfect storm of like, "Oh, I'm a woman and I'm going to have the biggest show at Barstool Sports. Watch me dance." Okay. And it was like this really cool challenge. But I think because of the nature of the content at the beginning of Call Her Daddy, it's difficult because I am in no way, shape, or form. I wouldn't change one thing about the beginning of that show. It was so provocative and in your face, and women needed it at the time. It was like, oh, instead of, because I think the feminist movement has had many different forms, right? It continues to change and evolve. And at that point, as someone who had just graduated college, everyone can be a feminist, right? And you can have a different version of how you associate it with it. But as long as you believe in the equality of the sexes, boom, okay. And you respect women, great. But for me, it was like, if men can say it to us, let's say it right back. And they're not going to like it. And it's going to be really uncomfortable, but let's go for it. And I think a lot of people loved it. No, I know a lot of people loved it. The show blew up and it was controversial and it was amazing. My struggle was being so proud of what I built, but also we just talked about that box of like, but I kind of want to talk about other stuff too. Yeah. And I felt like I got pigeonholed into this, like, that's the girl that talks about sex and dating. Yeah. And it was really difficult for me to respect and acknowledge what had been built. And it is like brilliant what Call Her Daddy Original Days was. But I also, now I'm 28 and I started it at 22, 23. I don't want to be the same person I was at 22. I'm not. I have a different outlook on life. I have a greater interest in what's happening in the world, in making a difference. Are you kidding me? At 22, I was like, let's drink, let's talk about sex, and let's have fun. And that was and that's what you should be doing right at that age.
Yeah.
But now as I've tried to transition the show, not because, and I want to clarify, no one has told me to do this. I made the decision because two things happened. In the pandemic, I think when you talk about something like sex and people are so freaked out by that concept and a little nervous to, I remember back in the day, engage with the brand because it was like, oh, they talking about sex. That is one of the most intimate topics that you can really talk about, and a universally inclusive topic, right? We all think about it in some capacity, right? I felt like if I can talk that deeply and that openly and that vulnerably on this platform to millions of people, still in therapy about that. Why was I so okay doing that? We're working on it, okay? But the point is if I can do that, my audience was ready when the pandemic hit. We need you to talk about some other stuff because none of us are enjoying our sex life right now, but we trust you enough, Alex. Let's have deeper conversations. And that is when I began talking about mental health. And that is when I opened up and acknowledged I'm in therapy. And the stigma around therapy, which I know a lot of people, is what's wrong with you. My mother is a psychologist. I grew up where mental health was the number one prerequisite in the house of how's your mental health? What's going on in your head? Where are you at? So I think that transition for Call Her Daddy for me felt so organic. It was like, of course we got to talk about more stuff. It's like eventually you graduate from high school, you got to go to college, or Algebra 1, we go to Algebra 2. Like Call Her Daddy is cemented as one of the best sex and relationship podcasts. There's 80 episodes. It is fire. You can learn some amazing tricks of the trade, okay? But what's next? And I could feel my audience ready for something new, and I was ready for something new. I wanted to explore other topics, not that I'm not going to continue to talk about those things. And that I think was a difficult transition that some people that don't want change, not my audience not only stayed with me, but then grew because people were like, oh, we're spicing up a little bit. There's more topics. There's more conversations, just not about sex. But I saw people that didn't like the show in the beginning. They're like, nope, you're still the sex girl. You cannot be talking about mental health and talking about sex. You can't tell me you're talking about sex in a deep conversation that has to do with mental health, or you're not getting deep enough because, well, no pun intended. But, but when I talk about that, it's like what we're going through in the world right now with sexual identity and fluidity and trying to understand. I mean, it's so beautiful now that we've started to embrace the concept of non-binary, and it's like letting people do what they feel comfortable doing. That is mental health and that is sex, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the struggle of respect has been people not loving me venturing out and straying away from what initially was the bread and butter of Call Her Daddy. And I have been an athlete my whole life, Jay. I love a challenge. When someone tells me I can't do something, but I will not lie, it has been so hard. Like trying to stay true to myself, authentic to the content, but also knowing and cognizant of the fact that there are people that are like, she's still sex. It's just sex. And I'm like, what? And so it's a difficult balance, but I've tried to just block out the noise, not read as many of the comments. And now I think through the new kind of version of the show, it's so cool that I've taken on these interviews and kind of like going back to what we kind of said in the beginning, I'm having on these celebrity guests that everyone's like, oh, you're going to have on celebrities now. But the point was, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier, I love this challenge of like, you're going to leave and you will relate to Demi Lovato. You will relate to Miley Cyrus. You will relate to Chelsea Handler. Like these people that are coming on that seem so, their life is so unattainable. No, we can relate to them. And I've been fortunate that this new format, and I think through my therapy journey and just because I know myself and I am a warm person, I am so interested in people's lives. I want to understand people better. It makes me better. It makes my audience better. Almost every single time a guest leaves Call Her Daddy, they say, wow, I have never felt so comfortable in an interview, and I've never opened up as much as I did in this interview. And I take pride in that because I put a lot of effort into making people feel comfortable, because when you're talking about really, really intense topics like we're talking about today, you need to be open-minded. You need to come into it unbiased, and you need to provide a space where it's like, you're safe. Let's have a conversation and no judgment. And I think a lot of these celebrities feel listen, there is no denying, we're not saying they don't have privilege and they don't have so many